Many historians and political theorists are talking about the decline of the American empire.
And there's the most important point. The American economy is in trouble. The American empire is in decline.
So is the tariffs and the current Trump's government's approach to trade, economy, and even foreign affairs all about halting this decline?
My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day, waiting for a long time. April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered as the day American industry was reborn, the day America's destiny was reclaimed, and the day that we began to make America wealthy again.
I want to try and explain this as succinctly as possible, but before I do, I have to give some background to the current US government's thinking on this. Adam Ferguson, an 18th century political theorist, stated that when great powers spend more on debt servicing than on military spending, then this country ceases to become a great power. In the last century, we saw this manifest in the collapse of two empires, the Soviet Union in 1991 and the British Empire post-World War II. You see, empires arise to enrich its centre, taking from its colonies to enrich its own land. For Britain, they looted its colonies of wealth and resources in order to enrich Britain. But what happens when the cost of maintaining its global dominance exceeds the revenues it accrues from this global dominance? By the end of the 19th century, the British Empire controlled world trade, had territories that contained 1/4 of the world's population, yet after 2 world wars and a few decades later, Britain's empire collapsed. The key factor being its massive debt. This had reached around 200% of its GDP. No longer could Britain maintain its military presence throughout its colonies, it just simply became too expensive. Its military began to retreat and instead attempted to create client states like the Gulf states and bind its former colonies into what they called the Commonwealth.
We shall be able to make of this ancient Commonwealth, which we all love so dearly, an even grander thing.
Ultimately, Britain's global power waned in the 20th century when we saw the rise of the great powers such as America and Soviet Union, and so Britain began to orbit around the interest of America as a way to maintain its global standing. America is now facing a similar problem. Its national debt is over $36 trillion. The interest payment on this debt is more than the annual expenditure on its military.
It's really astounding that the interest payments alone on the national debt exceed the Defense Department budget, which is shocking because we spend a lot of money on defense. And if that just keeps going, we're essentially going to bankrupt the country.
Thus, it's harkening back to what Adam Ferguson said 300 years ago, that when the debt servicing is more than your annual military budget, then you cease to become a great power. Not only that, but the trade deficit of America is more than $1 trillion. That's the difference between the amount they pay for imports compared to the amount they sell in exports. The problem is further compounded by the rise of China as a global trading and manufacturing state. So how is America trying to halt this decline, maintain its empire? This is where Mar-a-Lago Accords come in. Mar-a-Lago Accords is a secret agreement made after the victory of Trump's election in November 2024 at Trump's residency called Mar-a-Lago. The full meeting and agreement of this accord has never been released. The architect of this was two individuals, Zoltan Pozsar, who is the Credit Suisse strategist, and also Hudson's Capital strategist, Stephen Miran. Stephen Miran now is the chairman of Trump's Council of Economic Advisors. So what's the aim of this accord? To put simply, it wants to do 3 key things. Firstly, reduce the debt through reduced military spending by getting other countries to spend more on military, or in essence, pay for American military protection. Secondly, devalue the dollar to help increase US exports and thus build American manufacturing base. And thirdly, develop a sovereign wealth fund. Currently, only countries which are in credit, like Arab Gulf countries or Norway, have sovereign wealth funds. Debtor countries like America are unable to develop this sovereign wealth fund. So through this strategy, America seeks to reduce its own spending, increase its trade, as well as increase its total assets. So how are they going to do this? Well, we've already seen this strategy play out. For example, the Ukraine-Russia ceasefire and the pressure America is placing on Europe.
We're committed to NATO. But NATO has to step up, and the Europeans have to step up more than they have. And I want to see them equalized because they are in for far less than we're in, and they should be at least equal. You understand that? Why is the United States, we have an ocean in between, why is the United States in for so much more money and other things as Europe? With that being said, and as you said, they've also been obviously very helpful, but we have put in far more than they have, and I think they should equalize.
America wants to reduce its military spending, but still maintain its military presence throughout the world. Naturally, therefore, calling for a ceasefire in Ukraine would reduce the amount of money they've been given to support Ukraine's fight against Russia. But also, America is pressuring Europe to spend more on its military and pay for American protection in Europe. Remember, America had previously pushed Ukraine into a war with Russia through promises of a NATO expansion, and now seeks to abandon not only Ukraine but Europe to Russian aggression and control. This forces Europe to either capitulate to Russian regional dominance, or what's more likely, to spend more on American military and its own military to achieve protection against Putin and Russia. But it's not just Europe facing this type of bullying tactics. Mexico is also forced to place more troops along its border to stop illegal migration as well as drug smuggling. And if they didn't, then Trump was going to place massive amounts of tariffs on Mexico.
The president to pause those tariffs on Mexico for a month, and it is the fact that Mexico's president agreed to send about 10,000 Mexican soldiers to the Mexico side of the U.S.-Mexico border, specifically, President Trump says, to deal with the fentanyl problem and fentanyl being brought across the border into the U.S.
So rather than America spending billions on border forces, they have pressured, if not bullied, Mexico to maintain the borders on behalf of America. This is where tariffs come in. So not only is America using the threat of Russia to push Europe to spend more on military and, in essence, for American military, but also tariffs are being used to pressure other states into doing what America wants for American interests. This is one aspect of the strategy of the Accords. The other strategy is to increase American assets. This has three strands. Firstly, we've seen how America seeks to deal with Ukraine to gain its rare earth minerals worth over $500 billion. We've also seen America desperate to take over Greenland, a country that's rich not only in rare minerals, but also contains 110 billion barrels of untapped oil.
But what it does have buried underneath that ice, according to the U.S. Geological Survey, is a lot of oil, billions of barrels of oil, and trillions of cubic feet of natural gas.
I'm actually planning a full video to explain America's obsession with Greenland, so subscribe to this channel and you'll be able to watch that as soon as it comes out. The second strand to this strategy is to place tariffs on all imports. The hope is that this will result in the renaissance of manufacturing throughout America. With imported goods like cars and electronics being more expensive because of tariffs entering the US, it will force either foreign companies to establish manufacturing plants in America and or result in more American companies setting up their manufacturing in the United States as opposed to places where there's relatively cheap labor like Taiwan or Indonesia.
My answer is very simple. If they complain, if you want your tariff rate to be zero, then you build your product right here in America, because there is no tariff if you build your plant, your product in America.
If your debt is ever increasing, but you're able to increase your revenue, then it's assumed you'll be able to reduce your debt. That's part of the strategy. There's a third strand to this, which is to devalue the dollar. Higher dollar value makes exports from America more expensive, but also makes imports cheaper. To devalue the dollar reverses this. Therefore, the idea is to increase the amount of American exports to foreign countries. But devaluing the dollar is in no other country's interest, as the dollar is the main reserve currency of every country in the world, because it's the currency of trade. Again, this is where Trump's tariff policies come into effect. Countries that have large exports to America are now facing a situation where the industries and economies are facing major shocks and a potential collapse. This means America can use tariffs as well as the promise of military protection to force countries to agree to their policies to American demands, like the devaluation of the dollar, pay for military protection, change their current 20 to 30 year treasury bonds into 100-year treasury bonds that yield less interest payments to these foreign countries, and to help devalue the dollar to help American economy in the long term.
So how do you convince other countries to act against their financial interests? Besant has suggested dividing countries into 3 categories: green for friendly nations, red for unfriendly ones, and yellow for those in the middle. Green countries would receive military protection and tariff relief. Those that don't play along will have high tariffs and no military aid, explicitly linking America's military might to its financial power, making other countries literally pay for protection.
This is why America's current strategy, or the Mar-a-Lago Accord, is seen as akin to a protection racket, like the mafia boss going around to shops and businesses in his area, expecting these shops and businesses to pay him to protect their shops and businesses. And if they don't, then they'll have their shop windows smashed in. In the same way, America, in its attempt to maintain its global dominance, is going around forcing countries to adopt policies that benefit America. If they don't, then they'll have their economies crashed or smashed in and their protection, their military protection, taken away. So will the Mar-a-Lago Accords work? This is the $36 trillion question.
We should be very concerned. The last time trade war on this scale has happened was in 1930s. Exactly in 1930, it was Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, and it led to a global recession worldwide.
Many economists are currently horrified by this approach, believing it will lead to a global recession. But what definitely can be seen is the true face of America, one that engaged in a protection racket, seeks to extort or threaten countries and their economies if these countries don't succumb to American interest. It also demonstrates the lie of global free trade, with something which is a central plank of capitalism. This idea is constantly being pushed to the Muslim world as well as the rest of the world, that our economies need to be more export-orientated economies, open to Western multinational corporations, and that they must reduce barriers to trade. This expectation is constantly contradicted by powerful states like America now with its protectionist policies. The reality is that the world's biggest economy wants to maintain its position in the world, maintain its global empire, and sacrifices its own beliefs in capitalism for protectionism, and one that will seek to bully smaller countries for its own economic and financial interests. But the solution for the Muslim world isn't found by gravitating towards BRICS or Russia or China, who have their own political and economic interests. More than ever do we need to break away from this rigged capitalist world order, largely controlled by America, to develop our own economies and our own industries in order to become a truly independent nation. Whether that's unifying the gas and oil resources in the Gulf states with the manpower and workforce of Egypt or even Pakistan, together with the mineral wealth and the rare earth wealth of Afghanistan and other Central Asian republics. The resources, wealth, and people, all the ingredients exist there in the Muslim world, including the solutions and policies that Islam itself offers. What we need is a strategic political vision that sees the collective strengths of the Muslim world utilized, one that serves the interests of the Ummah built on an Islamic vision. What we can't do is simply follow the same path of dependency and weakness that America wants us, the Muslim world, to be in. One that maintains America's global power and position within the world, but keeps the Muslim world down. The Muslim world is not weak, as I've said. We have the resources and all the ingredients, but what we need is political will. The true Islamic leadership that looks at Islam and the vision of Islam as a guiding factor on how to develop our economies, our societies, and our countries. If you like this video, please subscribe to the channel and also share it and comment also, do you think America's plan will actually save the American empire?